Today's video is on algebra expressions, and we're going to collect like terms and multiply expressions. If you recall from the last video, like terms are ones and when the variable part is exactly the same. For example, in both of these, they both have x to the first, or in this one, they both have just a y. To combine like terms, you're going to add or subtract the coefficients according to your sign numbers rules, and you're going to keep the variable just as it is. For example, I have 7x plus 5x. Well, both variables are x, so my answer is going to be a x. As far as the coefficient, I would have 7 plus 5, and 7 plus 5 is 12. If I look at this one, both of these are y, so we're going to keep that y. So the answer is going to be in terms of y. And then I have 8 plus 4, which again would be 12. Now, when you have positive and negative numbers, you're going to have to remember your sign number rules. For example, here, the first variable is y, which really means 1y minus 6y. Well, looking at the coefficients, that gives you 1 minus 6, which translates into 1 plus a negative 6. And if you remember your signed number rules, if I have a positive number and a negative number, I have to find the difference, which would be 5, the sign of the larger. So the result of 1 plus a negative 6 would be a negative 5. So this answer would be negative 5, and again would have the variable, which is just y. If you have more than two terms, you can just do them two at a time and then combine with the last one. Here, both the variable portions are xy, so I know xy is going to appear in my simplified version. Start out with the coefficients. This is 6 minus 7, which translates into 6 plus a negative 7, which results in a negative 1. So I know this first part would be a negative 1xy. I'll bring down what's left, which is negative 8xy, and I'll start the process all over again. So if I look at the coefficients, I have negative 1 minus 8. Will this translate into negative 1 plus a negative 8? Well, the result of two negative numbers gives you a negative number, and you're going to add the amounts or the quantities. 1 and 8 would make 9. So negative 1 plus negative 8 makes negative 9. So if I combine negative 1y with negative 8y, I'm going to get negative 9xy. Now, when they give the direction simplify, that means to simplify anything that can be combined. If you look at these, some things can be combined and some things cannot. For example, I notice that the 6y and the 4y are like terms, and I notice that the 5 and the negative 3 are like terms. When you combine like terms, there's a certain order that's like in algebra. You put the variables first, and then you put the constants in the back. So in this one, I would do 6y plus 4y, which is 10y. And then I would have a 5 minus 3, which would give me a positive 2. Now, these are not like terms, so this is as simple as you can get it, just 10y plus 2. In the next example, I'll point out the like terms. 7y can be combined with y, and negative 5 can be combined with 8. Well, 7y plus 8, or 1y, would give me 8y, and negative 5 plus 8 would give me a positive 3. So 8y plus 3 would be the simplified version. Now in this one, you have lots of different variables. So if you have more than one variable, as well as putting the variables first and the constant second, you want to put them in alphabetical order if possible. So starting out, it looks like I would have these terms that have x. Next, I would have these terms that have y. And lastly, I can combine these terms that are constant. So starting with the x's, negative 9x and negative x, well, that translates into negative 9 plus a negative 1, which would make a negative 10x. If I do the y's, I have a negative 7y, negative 2y, which would translate into negative 7 plus a negative 2, which would give me a negative 9y. And then finally, the numbers, I have a positive 2 and a positive 12, which would make a positive 14. Now, when you multiply, you don't have to have like terms. You're going to just multiply the coefficients together. When you see a number touching a parenthesis like this, you're going to multiply the 5 times the 5y by multiplying 5 times 5, which would be 25, and then you're just going to carry over the y. In this one, negative 8 times 9, and remember when you multiply a negative number times a positive number, you're going to get a negative answer. Well, 8 times 9 is 72, and just carry over the x. Now, this pattern is called the distributive property. This is where you have a single quantity on the outside, or a single term on the outside, and there's two or more terms on the inside. You're going to multiply what's on the outside by each term that's on the inside. So for example, on this one, I'm going to do 6 times x, which is 6x. And then I'm going to do 6 times a positive 5, which would be a positive 30. A reminder, you do need to put the sign in here, because if there's two terms inside this parenthesis, there should be two terms in your answer. Again, these are not like terms, so that's as far as you can take the answer. Now on this one, you just see a minus sign out front. What a minus sign out front means that there's an understood negative 1. So this translates into negative 1 times 2x minus 7. So you end up having negative 1 times 2x and a negative 1 times a negative 7. Well, negative 1 times 2x would make negative 2x. Negative 1 times negative 7 would make a positive 7. On this one, negative 5 times 4a, negative 5 times 3. Negative 5 times 4a is negative 20a. A negative 5 times a positive 3 would make negative 15. And finally on this one, negative 4 times 5x and negative 4 times negative 3. Negative 4 times 5x would be negative 20x. Negative 4 times a negative 3 is a positive 12. Now here, these problems involve both multiplication and collecting like terms, or the addition and subtraction. It's just kind of like when you do order of operation. You'll do any multiplication first, and then you'll do any combining of like terms after you do that to make sure your answer is simplified. When I look at this one, I notice that I need to start on this portion right here because this indicates a multiplication. So I'm going to have to distribute the 3 to both of these terms. Well, the result of that would give me 3 times 5, which is 15, plus 3 times x would be 3x, and then I'm just going to carry down my negative 17. Now I need to look for any like terms. The only thing that are like terms are this 15 and this negative 17. So my answer, I would start with the variable. There's nothing to combine it to, so it's going to stay 3x, and then I need to combine a positive 15 and a negative 17. Well, a positive number times a negative number, you have to find the difference between those numbers, which would be a 2. The sign would be a negative 2. So the final result would be 3x minus 2. In this next example, there's two places where it indicates multiplication. I need to multiply both of these by negative 7, and I'll need to multiply both of these by a 5. So negative 7 times x is negative 7x. Negative 7 times a negative 1 is a positive 1. Likewise over here, positive 5 times 2x is positive 10x. Positive 5 times a positive 3 would be positive 15. Now looking again at like terms, these two are like terms, these two are like terms, so I can combine them together. A negative 7x and a positive 10x, well, one is a positive, one's a negative, so I'll find the difference between those numbers, which is a 3. The larger number is positive, so it's going to be a positive 3x. Positive 1 and positive 15, they're both positive, so the answer is going to be positive. It'll be a positive